Hail, you sinners and saints that are curious enough about God and His will for us that you chose to click on this call out. Today in this study we continue to look at the book of Genesis. However, our study has advanced to the fifth chapter. Because of this fact, I suggest that those who have not previously participated in this study, that you go to the beginning of the series to check out the earlier chapters. Those using desktop or portable computers should see a call out on the upper corner of your screen. And if you click on that call out, you can go to the first session of this series and start off from there. Please excuse the poorer quality of those earlier videos. They were made before our camera upgrade, so they're a little bit fuzzy. They don't have the ability of our newer camera system here. Now please watch not only the presentation on this topic, but also know that you're invited to watch the Zoom discussions that are held later in the week about those previous chapters. They're also on my site here. Now you can find both of the videos and the Zoom sessions here on YouTube, and they're listed on my page entitled Pastor T.J. Beam. That's Pastor T-E-E-J-A-Y Beam. Now we followed the flow of the text using tools supplied by modern biblical inquiry. In continuing, we will examine the text according to its history, its redaction and form. Now we tried to do this in all of our efforts in order to stay faithful to its original context and context of its writer and the perceived intent of those writers. With that being said, let's begin with the content of chapter 5 here in Genesis. I'll read it for you, and the text should scroll on the screen in front of me. This is the book of the generations of Adam. When God created man, He made him in the likeness of God. Male and female He created them, and He blessed them and named them man when they were created. Now when Adam had lived 130 years, he fathered a son in his own likeness, after his image, and named him Seth. The days of Adam after he fathered Seth were about 800 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. Now, here we have a distinct break from the previous story from the author that we call J, about the strife between Cain and Abel and God. At the section at the beginning of chapter 5 here, we see a pronounced change in the author and the flow. First, we detect the use of the name Elohim once again for God. As you remember in the first book, or the first chapter of the book of Genesis, Elohim was the name used for God. This informs us that when Genesis was written, the final redactor nested the J inheritance, the story in chapter 2 and 3 and 4, into the writing, and then installed a little bit more of his own narrative. That priestly writer, as we call him, did this and skipped over the story of the Garden of Eden, the fall into a disobedience, and the murder of Abel at the hands of Cain. Here the final writer continued editing the book by stating the genealogy of Adam and Eve. through the subsequent son. In sequence, we therefore read that Seth was born, that son. With the present biblical investigation, there is no indication for us whether Seth was born either before or after the death of Abel, and the exile of Cain. However, most think that Seth was born later. Seth was born after the killing of their first son. We take note, however, that Adam was 130 years old when Seth was born, and lived for 800 years more, for a total of 930 years. Now, any modern person that reads the book of Genesis first begins to question the length of their lifespan, the lifespan of Adam, and his ability to father children in his old age. Now, my answer to this lays in the fact that Adam was created to live forever in Eden. Having originally possessed a perfect genetic code, when the couple was expelled from the garden because of sin, the effects of living in a world infected by thorns and thistles and other such terrible stuff caused him to begin the aging process. Consequently, I hold the opinion that the shorter lifespans of generations of the family of man, especially after the days of Noah and the flood, were the result of the punishment for disobedience and the subsequent effects of human sin and stilted environment. Now, we take note that during this time we didn't have the Ten Commandments. So sin was something that was not accounted. It was present because of the disobedience of Adam and Eve, but it wasn't counted against them as it is after the flood. Now, reading in the biblical genealogical record, in the subsequent verses, we begin. When Seth had lived 105 years old, he fathered Enosh. Seth lived after he fathered Enosh 807 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. When Enosh had lived 90 years, he fathered Kenan. Enosh lived after he fathered Kenan 850 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Enosh were 905 years, and he died. When Kenan had lived 70 years, he fathered Mahalalel. Kenan lived after he fathered Mahalalel 840 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Kenan were 910 years, and he died. When Mahalalel had lived 65 years, he fathered Jared. Mahalalel lived after he fathered Jared 830 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Mahalalel were 895 years, and he died. Now when Jared had lived 162 years, he fathered Enoch. Jared lived after he fathered Enoch 800 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. Now, we see the longevity of the people before the flood of Noah, and the amount of sons and daughters that could be produced during those centuries, and we can see a very quick exponential growth of the population. Here we have to begin to have questions concerning the accuracy of this genealogy. We note a similarity of names between the descendants of Seth and the descendants of Cain, his elder brother, who had been driven away from Adam and Eve. Those who were earlier said in the previous chapter to be citizens of the city of Nod, cast out from the land of Adam and Eve. The similarities, however, begin now with the listing of Enoch's children. Enoch, you see, according to Scripture, says this: when Enoch had lived 65 years, he fathered Methuselah. Enoch walked with God after he fathered Methuselah 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Now we notice a difference here. You see, all the rest had died. Enoch was just simply not. And the expression has been that God simply took him, and he did not die. And he was favorable before God. Now, 200 BC, many centuries after this writing, we saw that the book of Enoch is a document which was written but not recognized in the canon of the church. Now, when Methuselah had lived 187 years, he fathered Lamech. Methuselah lived after he fathered Lamech 782 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. Now we note Methuselah, 969 years, that's almost 1,000. And he is the oldest person ever recorded in Holy Scripture. We continue reading. Now when Lamech had lived 182 years, he fathered a son and called his name Noah, saying, out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief from our work and from the painful toil on our hands. Lamech lived after he fathered Noah 595 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. After Noah was 500 years old, Noah fathered Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now, as we look at this and hear about this genealogy, there are several things. First, the length of living for each of the men, which was far beyond what we have today. And the fact that no women were listed by name. Simply it was said that they fathered sons, many other sons and daughters. So what we can derive from this is that the ancient scribe had inherited this story and genealogy, but it may have overlapped one another from other sources. It may also have recorded the years as deliberately declining in age as generations went forward. Now, as we go on reading in the Old Testament, we see that the age of living for the patriarchs of the faith went on. The lives of them got shorter and shorter through through Noah, Abraham, and so forth, all the way down to where God decreed a certain lifespan, but eventually, because I think the effects of sinfulness and living in a fallen world, we came down to less than 100 years old was the length of our human life. So, in this chapter, thus, we have a story that points us in the direction that although sin wasn't held against them because of commandments, that they had begun to degenerate in their living to the point that God was of the mind that something had to be done.